Hello there, my Fantasticos. Good morning. It is Lynda Mullaly Hunt, author of Fish in a Tree, and I am here for our second portion of question and answer. So I'm going to begin by reading chapter 17, which should be the last chapter of your section, and then I will answer some questions. So let's jump in. We are starting with chapter 17, Misfit Lunch. I watch Albert sit at his desk and stare at the pages of a book. I know he's not reading. His eyes don't move at all. I see he has a new bruise in his jaw, and I decide I'll go over and talk to him. Hey, I say. He looks up. Then something comes out of my mouth I don't expect. Do you want to sit with Keisha and me at lunch? Why? He asks. Well, you sit alone, and we sit alone, but together too, so I thought we could all sit alone together. That isn't a logical conclusion, he says. Clearly, if we are all together. Yeah, I interrupt. I know, it was a joke. So do you want to? Well, I suppose so. I guess I've got to eat somewhere, he says. Time space, so we skip some time. Albert leans his chair back as he shakes his empty carton of chocolate milk to let the drops fall on his tongue. I wonder who decided that a half pint of milk was enough. Why don't you just buy 2? I ask. He puts his chair down and stares. Can't you just ask your mom for extra money in the morning, I say, readjusting my fake sling? This thing is a pain. I don't have to ask for money. It's kind of prepaid. And then I realize all at once, of course. How stupid can I possibly be? Albert doesn't have many clothes, and he gets tickets from Mr. Daniels every morning. I guess I never thought about it before. He must get one of the free lunches. I hope I didn't upset him, so I say, I'm sorry. About what? He asks. Well, you know, that you get a free lunch. He shrugs. There are worse things than a free lunch, I mean. Yeah, I guess. It disturbs my mom, he says, but my dad says he wants to leave his mark on mankind with one of his inventions, and she says he should get a real job. They fight about it a lot, actually. I'm really surprised he told me that, and I decide to never tell another soul about it. Hey, Keisha says, sitting down. Hey, I say, and Albert nods. So, Albert, Keisha says, I watch Star Trek because you're always spouting off about it. The special effects are not that special. Kind of pathetic, actually, like a first-grade puppet show. Albert looks horrified. Keisha laughs as she unwraps her sandwich. Yeah, I knew that would get you. Shay's voice arrives before she does. Look, Jessica, she says as they walk by. It's the island of misfit toys. Yeah, Jessica says. It's like a 6-legged freak. Shay laughs, and Jessica looks proud of herself. Those girls are like walking pricker bushes, Keisha says, taking a bite of her sandwich. Don't let them bother you. They don't bother me, Albert says. It doesn't bother you at all that they call us misfit toys, I ask. It doesn't bother me, Keisha says. That girl can flap her gums about me until the sun rises and sets again. I really don't care. I wish I didn't care. And I wish I wasn't jealous of Shay and all that she has. Albert is wide-eyed. But why are the toys all misfits? Square wheels on a train can be fixed easily enough. Albert has his most serious voice turned up to high. And what's wrong with the doll, anyway? Why is it a misfit? It seems to adhere to the standards of a typical doll. Wow, he is in full professor mode. The Charlie in the box, he continues, is just like a Jack-in-the-Box in every way, but his name. But something is not a misfit simply because it has a different name. That isn't true, I blurt out. He looks shocked. I suppose he isn't used to being corrected. He holds up his milk carton. Suppose I say this is orange juice. Doesn't change what is inside. That's different, I say, thinking that if the milk we're told enough times that it were orange juice, it might feel that way. It is the same principle, he says. I think of words like dumb and baby and think how wrong Albert really is. What about the cowboy, Keisha asks. He rides an ostrich instead of a horse. That's got to make him a misfit. Albert looks up. It is illogical to say he is a misfit, just because he chooses to ride a different animal, provided he can carry out his cowboy duties. Albert, Keisha says, how can you possibly say cowboy duties with a straight face? I don't understand, he says. Keisha's forehead touches the table as he continues, especially when you consider that ostriches run faster than horses, require less water to drink, and can use their legs and feet as weapons. They are fierce kickers with sharp claws. I, for one, would trade a horse for that. That's just logical. And then I think that if someone hung a sign on me that said anything, having that sign there wouldn't make it so. But people have been calling me slow forever, right in front of me, as if I'm too dumb to even know what they're talking about. People act like the word slow reader tell them everything that's inside, like I'm a can of soup, and they can read the list of ingredients and know everything about me. There's lots of stuff about the soup inside that they can't put on a label, like how it smells and tastes and makes you feel warm inside when you eat it. There's got to be more to me than just a kid who can't read well. And so that is the end of the chapter. I'm sorry I made a few mistakes. I do tend to make a couple of mistakes when I'm reading aloud, and, that's the way it goes. I'm sorry about that. But if I refilmed it, I'd just make a mistake somewhere else. So, a couple interesting things about this chapter. This chapter started with a movie in my head of Albert tipping his chair back and dropping dripping chocolate milk in his tongue. That was the picture in my head that began this entire chapter. So then I sat down to type it, and I saw this movie of all these things happening in the cafeteria. Now, another thing that I'll throw in here is that my very first draft of this book was actually historical fiction. My very first draft of this book took place in the 1970s, which is one of the reasons why the Misfit Toys were in there, because that show was actually released in the 70s. But in speaking to my editor, we thought it might be better to bring it up to modern times, and that felt like a good decision to me. So by the second draft, it was then set in, like 2015. But I did ask around. I did ask some random kids in the neighborhood and such if they knew what the Misfit Toys were, and most kids did know. However, if you go to YouTube and you put in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Misfit Toys, you can see that cartoon with those toys talking to each other. All right, so let me jump into some questions. Let's see. All right, first question. Steel pennies. I'm sorry, you're looking at the top of my head again. You did that in the last video. All right, steel pennies. So I have a couple of pennies here, and you can see that they are very different colors. Okay, this one is made out of steel. It's a 1943 penny. So it's the color of dimes, quarters, and nickels. This is the penny that you're used to. They're not actually made out of copper anymore. But if you're wondering why the pennies in 1943 were made of steel, it was because the United States was in the middle of World War II, actually toward the end of World War II. And they needed the copper for ammunition for the war. So for 1 year only, in the year 1943, they made pennies in this color. However, a lot of people complained about it. They kept confusing pennies with dimes because they're roughly the same size. And so the United States did not produce pennies in copper after that, but they did make them red in color. I think they might have been iron. Actually, I'm not sure. But anyway, they were red in color. The way that you can tell if a penny is made out of steel is this is a magnet, and a magnet will not pick up a penny, a regular penny, but it will pick up a steel one. So that's kind of fun. All right. As I talked a little bit about coins in the last video, and I do have lots of coins lying around. My mother used to talk about buffalo nickels and how she used to carry those around when she was a little girl. So maybe I got that from her. I just, I've always liked coins. All right, see. I did get a question about whether I have ever received a compliment that made me feel successful, and I'd say absolutely. In fact, I think what made me work so hard in the 6th grade is, my 6th grade teacher, who I really respected and liked, like Allie feels about Mr. Daniels. I really did like receiving compliments from him. So I really did seek that out. However, compliments feel good, but you can't let yourself be too affected by them. Because, sometimes people will say nice things and that makes you feel good. But sometimes, what if somebody says something that isn't a compliment and really doesn't make you, feel that good? So I think by the time I'd gotten into high school, I was really more in a mode of sort of trying to get compliments from myself. Okay, so maybe I didn't get 100 on this test, but I did better than I did on the last test, and I did better in this class than I did in last year's class. So it's human nature. Everybody likes compliments. Of course you do. But you don't want to depend on them too much. I think you really need to look for yourself, look to yourself for compliments. Let's see. Why the sketchbook of impossible things? Unfortunately, a lot of my answers are I saw it in my head. And I saw a movie in my head of Allie drawing. Now, that could be that my daughter has carried around a sketchbook since she was really young and has been drawing in it since she was really young. She loves to draw. She can draw really well. She did not get that from me. I cannot draw well at all. But it did sort of come from that, I'm sure. She's actually drawn some pages for the sketchbook for me. Another question was about my thought process. Do I really have to sit and think a lot about books? Actually, a first draft is very different than all the other drafts. A first draft comes from the guts. And the first draft has a ton of mistakes. So, if you're out there and you're thinking, I would really like to be a writer, what advice would she give me as a writer? Well, I would say, let yourself make mistakes. Mistakes are part of the process. Mistakes are part of success. So on my first draft, I kind of watch these movies. I see these moving pictures in my head, and I type everything that I see. Occasionally, as I'm typing, I know something won't work, but that's okay. I just push through. The gold is in the revision. That's when it becomes a real book. But for me, the stuff that I'm the best at, I think, comes out of the first revision or the first draft. So revising for me, a big part of that is making sure I don't remove the wrong things. And that's important. That's important. So no, I don't really sit back and think, not in the first draft. Certainly with drafts after that, I will have to sit back and say, okay, well, if I want to put something in chapter 51, it can't just appear out of the blue. So I'll go back, and sometimes I'll have to ribbon something through the entire book in order for it to make sense. So it's funny. Some parts of the books are written in the guts, and some parts of the books are written in the head. It's like a very cerebral or intellectual decision. Another question, how do I name my characters? Well, my main characters are all named after my ancestors. So Allie Nickerson is named after my great-great-grandfather, Sassman Nickerson, who I believe was born in Ireland. So main characters are always named that way. Let's see. Travis, I don't know. Travis, I just knew his name. Like who he was with his greasy overalls and everything just dropped right into my head. And I think it took me under 30 seconds to just settle on his name. Sometimes I'll go through names in my head and just sit with it silently and see if it feels right. And I stumbled upon Travis very quickly. Jessica and Shay. Shay was named because I was sitting around with a bunch of girls, actually, and I was having them brainstorm names for me, and Shay felt right for that character. Although I feel badly because I have met some Shays that are very, very nice. So, I don't know. For that particular character, it felt right to me. Jessica, I just sort of settled on an average, regular sort of name. So I guess I'm kind of rambling because I don't really have any. Well, actually, I do have a story about Albert. Albert was named Anthony in my very first draft of this book. And I was walking through an antique store up in New Hampshire, which is a store that sells old things. Now, back in the 1970s, you could peel a soup label off of a can for Campbell's Soup Company, and you could fill it out and send it to the company, and they would send you a bowl, an alphabet soup bowl, with your name stamped in the middle. I found this bowl. And at the time, the title of this book was Alphabet Soup. So I'm like, okay, it's a bowl based on alphabet soup. That's the title of my book. It's got Albert's name in the middle. I have to buy this bowl. But I had no Albert. So once I got home, I ended up changing Anthony to Albert. And I've always been a fan of Albert Einstein. Both of my kids are a fan of Albert Einstein. In fact, I have this guy who's been sitting near my desk for years. I think the kids picked him out at the Boston Science Museum a really long time ago. And we refer to Albert this and Albert that, like since they were young, like we're all on a first name basis with Albert Einstein. So it really made sense. I mean, as soon as I found that bowl, Albert Einstein just sort of evolved very quickly. And Albert in the book became a scientist. Let's see. Mystery boxes. So, mystery boxes really do exist. Here is one. I actually made this one for my launch party because one of the activities I had was a mystery box. But when I taught third grade, I had Fabulous Friday. Not Fantastico Friday. I wish I'd thought of that earlier. But I had Fabulous Friday. And so for the last 45 minutes, every Friday afternoon, we would do some activity. And you will see another one of those activities about a wolf and a chicken and a river and stuff. You haven't gotten to that yet. But that was another activity that I did on one of those afternoons. And so the mystery boxes were an activity that I used to do. Now, I did that for probably 10 years in a row. And in all that time, there was only one student that I had who was able to figure out that the object was tied and taped and actually suspended in the middle of the box. And I was, fascinated with that the kid was able to figure that out. That's really impressive. So I did give Allie that gift. It would make sense that if she has dyslexia, that she is very, very good at visualizing things in her head. It would make sense that she would be able to solve a problem like that. All right, so I actually think, are those all my questions? Oh, actually, I just found a couple more. Let's talk about Albert. I've gotten a couple of people who've asked me, what do I want you to learn from Albert? And the honest answer is, because I tend to be very honest, is that I don't set out to create a character or write a book with any lesson in mind. Albert is Albert. Like, to me, he feels completely real, as all those characters do. Oliver feels so real to me. I love Oliver. When I envision Oliver, I can smell graham crackers. Isn't that weird? And I did put that detail in the book. I don't know if you've gotten to it yet, but isn't that weird though? I mean, I just know who they are. So I think that there are some lessons we can learn from Albert, but as an author, I never set out to do that. For me, it's just character. It's character development. And if the character feels authentic and real to the reader, they may walk away with something. I think Albert teaches us that different is a good thing. Most of my friends now who are authors and really gifted illustrators and artists and people who do pottery and all these really wonderful creative things, they were different when they were kids. And for some reason, somewhere along the way, mankind got it into their head that being different is a bad thing. It's not. It's really not. And the older you get, the better it is for you, actually. Those things that make you different turn out to be gifts later on. These movies that I see in my head, they were a pain when I was in the 4th grade. The teacher would come and ask me a question, and I didn't have an answer because I was watching these mind movies in my head. But what am I doing now? It's like I'm living a dream, you guys. I'm writing books. I'm traveling around. I'm talking to kids. It's like my 2 favorite things in the whole world. Telling stories and kids. So it's a gift. It's a gift. If you'd asked me when I was 10 years old, I would have wished it away, and that would have been a mistake. So, I don't know. I would like to hear from you. What do you think we can learn from Albert? I personally think there are lots of things we can learn from Albert, but I can't really say those things because you're not done with the book. Maybe later. Okay. Which came first, the reader or the writer? Well, I told you guys I struggled with reading and writing, but I love to tell stories, and I loved Legos. Legos were not fancy when I was a kid. You just get a giant box of bricks, and you'd have to create things all on your own, and I used to create very complicated Lego cities and stuff on the dining room table. I did not have a lot of toys, but my mother was a big believer in Legos, so I did have Legos, and I had an electric train set that went around the table. So with those Legos and with those little figures, I used to spend hours telling stories. I mean, that's what you're doing when you're, moving this character, moving this character. That's what you're doing when you're looking at a blank table and you're creating a city made out of Legos. That's what you're doing. You're telling stories. You're creating characters. So it began with storytelling. And it began with writing songs, because I did tell you guys I struggled in school, and that was true. And I did not write a lot of stories when I was young. But there were some things that happened that were very difficult for me when I was young. We had some things happen in our family that were really tough. And one of those things was my brother, Michael Eric, passed away. He got very, very sick just before his 4th birthday. In fact, the youngest Murphy boy in my first book, One for the Murphys, is named Michael Eric after my real-life brother. And that bothered me for years. And I used to write songs to him. And when I walked home from school, I used to sing those songs to him. And I used to write songs sort of theorizing where he might be and what heaven might look like. And, was he up in the sky looking down on me? Was he really with me? Was his spirit with me? And things like that. I used to think a lot about that stuff. And I never really talked about it. I can't remember a time, really, where I sat down with my mom and talked about that stuff. But I would write songs about it. And when I struggled in school, I would write songs about that. I do think that writing songs was the first training I had for getting emotion down in very few words. So, who knows? Maybe that's another reason why I'm here. But I've always loved to tell stories. And songwriting is another way to do that. So, I think that I've gotten all the questions taken care of for our second portion of the book. I am so, so grateful to you guys that you are reading Fish in a Tree. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much. And watching these videos. It's really cool that you're watching these videos. So I'm all alone in my office, but I feel like I'm talking to a lot of readers, so that's cool. So I guess I'm going to have to end all these videos with have a silver dollar day, and I will be in touch soon. All right, take care. Bye-bye.